Right, so we gotta go again, right? I don't mind losing a video or two to time, as new information comes out or something becomes irrelevant, but if I make a mistake, we do have to correct it. So I did put out a video yesterday going over basically the set layout of Compendium of Rathe Pen, looking into the card codes of everything that was being revealed to create a clearer picture of the sets. Now, unfortunately, I misread a couple of cards. Fire that Burns Within and Comeback Kicks I read as 225 and 228, and that's simply just not the case, right? Fire that Burns Within is 255, and Comeback Kicks is 288, and unfortunately, this creates a much clearer image of how the set is laid out, which I guess is a good thing. But if you did catch the previous video, we talked about a potential mysterious 60 card slot between the last talent section and the generics. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't exist, right? With these proper card numbers, that slot is not at least 60 cards. It's not, I think, a significant enough amount of cards to introduce a new class or hero, which was definitely a very, very interesting element for the set. But again, with that gone, we now have, a better, clearer idea of how the set is actually laid out. So I will put the previous video, the one that I've taken down while I've unlisted it, in the description if you are curious, right? Because there will probably be some thoughts or discussions in that I will miss, right? Now that I'm doing it a second time, it's a lot easier to just power through and make everything a bit, clearer, right? So in terms of the cards we know, we have Brute at 1, Guardian 17, Mechanologist 57, Ranger 82, Runeblade 92, and Pirate 168. And then for talents, Elemental at 205, Draconic 255, and Revered at 288. And then generic starting at 309 with Balance of Justice, although I do want to note that Shelter from the Storm is 321, and that does leave room for the exact counts of the Antiquity cards, right? The 17 Majestics and 10 Rares that will feature in the Antiquity pack. So I would highly expect that that is all the reprints, right? Stashed into the actual Compendium of Wraith set as well. So from this, we can then understand layout, right? So usually sets follow a alphabetical order, right? So for instance, Assassin, Brute, Guardian, Mechanologist, Ranger. Unfortunately, doesn't work here. There's no room for Assassin before Brute, and Pirate should be before Ranger and Runeblade, and Talent Section Draconic should be before Elemental. So it's not alphabetical, but rather by release, and then alphabetical. So you have Brute Guardian, and then most likely Ninja Warrior from Welcome to Rathe, and then Mechanologist, Ranger, Runeblade, and Wizard, Arcane Rising, and then each subsequent set that introduced a new class. Same goes for the talents. Now, there are a few cases that obviously break the mold. We had Dynasty, where Assassin was sandwiched in the middle, and then we had Dusk Till Dawn, which did have a supplemental section, so to speak, or rather, a large class hitting section at the tail end of the set, but you still had, the core Illusionist, Light, and everything at the front. But generally speaking, this does seem like it will be the case for Compendium of Wraith. So if we try to squish everything that currently exists into the layout, we get this, right? Brute, Guardian, Ninja Warrior, Welcome to Wraith, Mechanologist, Ranger, Runeblade, Wizard, Arcane Rising, Merchant, Shapeshifter from Crucible of War, Illusionist, Monarch, Assassin, Dynasty, Bard, technically Bright Lights rank, because that's when it was released, in the auxiliary product, right, around the table, Necromancer, Pirate, and Thief from ICs. Talent-wise, Light, Shadow, again, Monarch, Elemental, Tales of Aria, Draconic from Uprising, then Mystic, Mistveil, Chaos, technically, right, could definitely see some level of support. That one's a bit more up in the air depending on, what we get in the Arachne Armory deck, if they're going to make it a full-fledged talent, and then Revered and Reviled from Super Slam. So, I am missing Royal, but going through the cards and refreshing my mind as to what exactly Royal does in terms of a talent, it's non-conventional, so usually it's tacked onto a whole bunch of different cards, right? Generic cards that say, if your hero is Royal, do this instead. Same with Tome of Imperial Flame as a Draconic card. So I do think I will exclude it, because even if it does get support, its support will be looped into most likely other cards, and they won't be Royal specific by themselves. And then Thief is in a sort of similar case, right? Because all the Thief cards we have currently are Pirate cards with a Thief interaction tacked on. We have no sort of standalone Thief things. Even I think the equipment piece is the same case as well, where it has an additional effect for Thief, but adamantly, right, LSS have said that Thief is a class, so potentially, maybe there's some support. But overall, the rationale here is kind of that there's 3 sets of chapter decks for Silver Age, right, at 5 apiece. Now, from the first 10, they are each hitting a different class. Now, I don't necessarily think the expectation should be that the 3rd chapter we see is going to continue that trend, but, if LSS want to essentially hit every hero of the course of Silver Age with a deck, that's fine. It's just going to, take a little while. but is definitely possible. It would just be, in my mind, sort of a cool element to have a chapter deck ready for each class as a starting point, right? And then you can sort of tweak it, transition between XYZ hero. So, potentially, right, maybe we see a weird chapter 3 section of Silver Age that features Thief, Necromancer as the two main missing classes, and then tucked in as well, Merchant, Shapeshifter, and a Bard. But if we then start to factor in the actual sizes of the potential card pools for each section, what we get from the averages of the revealed cards is around 15 cards per class and about 10 cards per talent, with some level of exception here or there. So Elemental, for instance, will also include Earth, Ice, and Lightning, most likely. So that section's a little bit bigger. And then same with Mechanologist to Ranger, although the expectation there is that Mechanologist will receive some level of extra love just because of how dynamic the class is in terms of the plethora of effects that they have access to, and then the little snippet from James White about supporting Teklo Vossen and trying to get him up and running. So yeah, some extra cards for Mechanologist, I could definitely see it. But in terms of fitting in all the classes, fortunately, just not enough room, right? Brute, Guardian, Ninja Warrior, smooth sailing so far, there's enough room. But then we get to Wizard, Merchant, Shapeshifter, Illusionist, Assassin, Bard, Necromancer, and we start to lose space, right? So between Runeblade and Pirate, the two revealed sections, there's just not enough room for all of those classes, meaning a few things do have to, unfortunately, get cut. It can't be a set for the entirety. Not that there is a legal hero for either Shapeshifter or Bard, right, for Silver Age itself, yet, at least. So making it look a little bit neater, we get Brute, Guardian, Ninja Warrior, again, fitting snugly, Mechanologist, Ranger, Runeblade, Wizard, an Illusionist, Assassin, Necromancer, Pirate, and then Thief potentially afterwards. But in all honesty, I'd expect any Thief cards that we do get to be mixed into Pirate, unless, we get a new Thief hero, but I don't think, again, unfortunately, there's enough room left to fit in a new hero or class anywhere within the set. Maybe a little bit of support for something that exists, right? But we'll get to that. Then for the talents, we have Light, Shadow before Elemental, then Elemental to Draconic, again with a larger card gap, most likely because of Earth, Ice, and Lightning. Then Mystic and Chaos can definitely fit, although I will point out for Draconic, there is a little bit of leeway there for, more card support, because we have a few, extra elements. We have Phoenix Flames, then we have Dragons with Dromai, and then we also have the dagger-centric heroes, Fang and Syndra. So for Draconic to have some support for, all of those archetypes, I could definitely see it, and I could definitely see Draconic having a few more cards similar to Elemental, and, probably Chaos being cut, and Mystic not needing so many cards, since, there's no cards needed for Class Constructed, unless we get, new adult Mystic heroes to make that card pool legal again, and then Revered and Reviled all before the generic section. So, again, thanks to the proper card numbers for Draconic and Revered, this definitely looks nice and comfy as a speculatory layout for the set, right? Again, incorporating, potentially 12 to 13 classes, depending on, again, what type of support Thief gets. Any of these sections could be, smaller or bigger than, obviously, 15 cards. I think it's fair to lay out it in a even fashion, but generally speaking, we do see, different levels of support, although not a huge gap, right? Where, a class gets a couple and a class gets 10 plus cards, so to speak, right? So yeah, 15 cards for each class and 10 cards for each talent, roughly. Seems like a pretty nice time, right? That's a little bit of room for some new stuff and some reprints, which seems like, again, that overall goal of the set, to offer something new, but also to create a lot of accessibility. Now, if Revered and Reviled do get less cards, right, so they are the latest talents coming from Super Slam, so if they only get, a handful of cards each, then there's a little bit of room from the talent section to basically the generic reprint section, because again, we get, most likely, the Antiquity Legendaries from Balance of Justice to Shelter from the Storm, and then after Shelter from the Storm, most likely the Rares and Majestics from the Antiquity pack as well. So yeah, potentially a little bit of wiggle room, but I don't necessarily know if that's where they'd stick a new hero or class when it comes to the set, right? I feel it'd either be at the start or tail end. In terms of support for an existing one, well, I honestly expect it to follow the other trend, right? So for instance, if Shapeshifter was to get some support, then it would be within that section between Runeblade and Necromancer after Wizard, again, because it was released in a Crucible of War. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, but obviously it's a lot less likely now that we have a much clearer framing of the different card gaps from what has been currently revealed. So, in terms of the generics, right, we have Balance Justice at 309, Unyielding Grip at 317, and Shelter from the Storm at 321. So going off of the, again, general layout that LSS follows, you get equipment, then you get cards, right? And then you also have it by rarity, and then, of course, alphabetized, right? So we have the legendary equipment, Balance of Justice, and then, again, most likely the other equipment that gets hit in the Antiquity pack. Maybe there's some leeway, maybe there's some cards they don't want to reprint because, again, they might not need a handful of copies, only a special Antiquity copy, but we'll have to wait and see. Then we get the normal equipment, so Unyielding Grip being a rare piece, and then we start with the generic playables. So again, Shelter from the Storm at 321 leaves exactly enough room for the 17 Majestics and 10 rare reprints featured in the Antiquity pack. So, in all honesty, that's what I expect. I don't expect there to be, new generics in terms of playables, unless, again, there are cards that only need the Antiquity version. And the Antiquity version isn't technically a good mode of delivery for accessibility, because you're getting one pack a box, so you're getting one rare and one Majestic a box, right? So that is very, very low on the pool side, right? So most likely they'll get a normal version, and then they'll get the Antiquity border version in the Antiquity pack. Now, I did still want to talk about Cheyenne, right? Because, yeah, she does feature here and there on the artwork, which is definitely very, very interesting. But I did mention in the previous video, right, her potential to be that one Marvel in the Antiquity pack. Now, it would not be a Marvel of the pre-existing Cheyenne, right? Because of the Cold War printing policy. So my comment was something like, it would sting if she does get a Marvel variant, and the rationale for that would be a new variant of Cheyenne, right? So there are still a few options for this to work within the set, right? So for instance, if Cheyenne was downgraded to a basic, right, or even, a rare or a common, and she did feature in the set as a accessible reprint, then she would be legal for Silver Age. We had a similar case in Mastery Pack Guardian with Avelda, right, being downshifted from a Majestic hero to now a playable hero for Silver Age. But in terms of artwork, we have this piece from the World's Banner, right, which features Cheyenne shapeshifting either to or from Icelander, which is definitely very, very interesting indeed. So, yeah, I could potentially see, again, a new Marvel artwork version for her with potentially a new hero box, new design that fits a little bit better with Silver Age, because unfortunately the majority of, specializations don't exist anymore for Silver Age. So even if China was a legal hero, she'd be one that wasn't functionally workable, right? The only hero that would be worse than her would be Emperor, his whole hero ability revolving around Command & Conquer, and Command & Conquer obviously not being legal for Silver Age. So yeah, again, a few workable options to have her feature in the set, and for Shapeshifter to become a part of Silver Age. Either again, China reprinted as a basic variant to again have an accessible version for everyone to have and play, and then again by lowest rarity, making her legal for Silver Age, or some level of rework and of course new art. But again, that question becomes, where would she fit in, and if there was enough room to make it work, right? I could see them putting it after, but the question would be, again, where exactly would Shapeshifter fit, right? And how many cards would it get, and would that be enough cards to actually make it decent? Well, again, depending on how they retool her ability, how many other cards she gets access to using the Shapeshifter mechanic would then definitely be the curiosity, because her card pool just depends on, essentially how restrictive they are with her ability, right? If they, made it open-ended and she could just have any card in her deck, she'd be absolutely broken, but then she doesn't actually need cards of her own, right? A few here or there for Shapeshifter, sure, but majorly speaking, she just becomes an amalgamation deck, right? Maybe they could, limit it to one copy, or go down the Emperor route, stick her with only reds, only yellows, only blues, something like that. Make all of them cost one extra resource. There's lots of ways that it could work and she could fit in, but yeah, I'd still like to see her, because I do really much like Shapeshifter. Shapeshifter was technically the first sort of Blitz hero I played, right? Rhina class constructed, and Cheyenne for Blitz. Yeah, it didn't go well, but it would be exciting to see, even if again it means my cold foil version of her becomes irrelevant if we do again go down the new art, new mechanic route, right? But other than that, we'll leave it there. Hope you enjoyed. Yeah.